Howdy, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning back into Roundup, the best Counter-Strike podcast that Snowball Esports produces. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I mean, there's one they produced about a game that's like Counter-Strike.
Yeah, some would say a copy, you know, but you know how copies are. They're not always as good. We'll leave that there. How are we? How have you been since we last recorded? There's been a lot of Counter-Strike.
Oh, there's been a huge amount of things that have unfolded over the past 2 weeks. You know, like we took a few days off. We were releasing on Wednesdays, but we kind of realized, look, we don't want to be putting up our episodes at the same time that matches are going live for ESEA Premier. So we kind of figured, good idea to move towards releasing on Fridays. So that's going to be the new schedule. Should be every 2 weeks on Fridays. We're recording this on Thursday night, the 11th. But a lot of big things, and one of the biggest things that I think we can get straight to is
we have a special presenting partner, and you might also notice that not only does that look a little different on the screen, it sounds a little different. In fact, I actually sound like something. And that is thanks to Blue. I've just dropped this whiteboard like 4 times. Thank you to Blue Microphones for hooking us up on all of our shows with some good stuff. You'll notice Duck had the same thing in Run It Back earlier this week, and
yeah,
I've got my own one right here. So massive shout out to Blue for this partnership. It feels good, man. The highlight of my week is doing all my Zoom calls at uni. And I'm like, hey guys, can everyone hear me? And the tutor going, oh, you sound crisp. And I go, hell yeah, I do. But yeah, massive shout outs. That's huge for us. I think it's going to be really cool going forward.
It's been unbelievable to be able to get on board with a brand like Blue, have them jump in and support us, what we're doing here and what Snowball's doing in general with our podcasts and stuff. So yeah, massive shout outs to them. So if you need yourself a good microphone, some good audio equipment, be sure to go check them out and give them some support. Give them a bit of love for supporting us.
Yeah, of course. We've got a fat show. Again, there was a lot of Counter-Strike. Of course, had to move it. There's so much Counter-Strike. So we've got some hot off the press this week, some drama in ANZ Champs. We're going to whip through some roster changes. There's some biggies, but there's not a lot of them. Event-wise, we're going to look at Premier, ANZ Champs, and then we're going to check in with EXTREMUM and Renegades. And there's a Renegades player that I believe you're going to be looking at with your feature later at the end of the episode.
That's right. Yeah.
Very excited.
But I do believe I heard hot off the press, Ash.
Hot off the press? Oh, dude, we haven't done one of these in a full month, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So yeah. Oh, well, okay. So ANZ Champs has started. And there was a bit of a scandalous thing that's happened in the first broadcast on Monday. And we had Team DOGE, who you might know is it Manyanyo?
Manyanyo.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
They qualified through the last weeks of open quals. And just before their match against the Dire Wolves, they were disqualified. And this was communicated through the broadcast that they are forfeiting their match and they will not be playing any more ESL events this year. That was communicated through the broadcast to everybody. There's been a bit of follow-up. So per some players here and there, it was a webcam issue. Per a tweet from Nick at ESL, he said that he wouldn't ban a team for a year just because of a webcam issue, and that, this inferring that there is actually more than we're being told. But the exact reason isn't exactly there's no statement from ESL Australia or whatever about what's happened yet.
There's definitely been some hearsay from the players about what's gone back and forth and things like that, saying that that pretty much it started with one of the players not being able to get their webcam on. There was some kind of thing between them and the admins, I think. And anyway, that's led to this situation. But the point is that that's basically what it looks like. That's what we know. ESL hasn't, other than the broadcast, other than what was actually said on the broadcast about it. So they said at the time that the team was disqualified for the rest of the season. that that's the apparent reason why their game against Direwolves was forfeited and that they've been banned from ESL comps for a year. Now, since that happening, some of these players have come out and on Twitter and said that these bans are looking like that they've been escalated to permanent bans. There's also been talk about how apparently it might have just been one of the players on the team that was instigating these things and leading to these issues, and how it's unfair that the whole team has been banned. But at the moment, the unfortunate thing is that from our perspective, at least looking onward, it's a lot of hearsay. It's a lot of kind of back and forth, but ESL isn't saying anything about it. They're staying very quiet on the issue, not giving a public comment. It would be really good to hear ESL give some public justification or actually say what happened, but I get the feeling that with the way this is, that's probably not going to happen. We're probably just going to see them stay quiet on it and just enforce the bans regardless, because that's what they think they want to do. I mean, it's their league, they're able to do it, but it's just, there's been a lot of people saying that it's not, it shouldn't have gone down like that.
Yeah, for me, it's just a bit disappointing, like ANZ Champs, we were hype for this.
Yeah, of course.
If I'm going to walk away with any wisdom, and you've heard me say this like 3 times now, but especially from my perspective, being good at CS and being a CS player is the hard bit. For me, I might be wrong, but being a decent person is like the easy bit. So just some wisdom for the general community, I think. Just remember that you're already good at the hard bit. So I would like to see more people just being good and following the rules. I think that's...
That being said, I hope it's not... Because again, we are going off very much hearsay because a lot of this is still unsettled. It's a very talked about issue. But if it is true that it was just one person out of the 5 instigating things and stuff like that, I don't think it's fair to cop permanent bans onto all of them.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. So I think that about sums it up, really, what we know about the bans and what... This is still kind of a developing story, I think. So if there's anything else that happens in the next few weeks, then hey, you might see a return to this story on Roundup. But what this looks like for ANZ Champs, on the other hand, and that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a good... well, we're going to talk about all the ANZ Champs stuff later because it does affect it, but when we get to it and I talk about what the Swiss stage is looking like, overall, outside of it being a bit shitty, it's just going to mean a couple teams get a free dub for the next 2 weeks. So I guess we'll jump to that. But before that, let's get into some things that other people also think are unfair that involve bans. Because yes, I believe you've got just a short ESIC ban update for us.
Yeah, indeed. So following up, so in case anyone has been living under a rock for the last month, over a month, 6 weeks or so.
I was going to say, it feels like 3 months, but,
It feels like a long time. But late January, 35 players were banned by ESIC for betting-related offenses. It was this massive thing that took out a huge amount of the Tier 2 AUCS scene. Across this time, there haven't really been too many updates that have come forward, largely because, as I think I went over in the last episode, there have been a lot of delays and things like that. And MJ Carr, Michael Carmody on Twitter, who has been representing a lot of these players, kind of vented his frustrations about how if ESIC can't provide the evidence and can't follow up on these bans in terms of dealing with the appeals and stuff, then they shouldn't have had the players banned in the first place. Which I think, giving my opinion on that, was a very, very, very fair take and something that is completely understandable. But as far as waiting for that evidence has gone, finally, a few days ago, on March 9th, MJ Carr tweeted that, quote, "Today the first of several confidential players constituting revised notices of charge have started to be received by a certain subset of players. I'll not go into the contents of this letter as per the first paragraph. I hope to discuss more later." It's been a journey, and the players I've been talking with have regularly been very patient, awaiting these first signs of movement. ESIC has been dealing with a series of complex issues, and the journey is far from being done, but movement has occurred, and hopefully we'll have more news to share soon. So the thing is with with that is these notices of charge, apparently they're not going to be made public, and there's a good reasoning. It's not just, more bullshit from ESIC or anything like that. It's because these letters contain, quote, personal details of player actions and potentially finances. It also contains data from third parties that are not ESIC, end quote. So the big thing here is that finally, after 6 weeks, there's been movement. And it's been a long journey to get here. A lot of things have been happening behind the scenes by the sounds of things. And it's just one step in what looks like will be a whole multitude of steps for these players going forward. But something.
Yeah.
It's good news. It is really good news that this is finally happening.
Yeah, I agree. I've been a little detached from it in the sense that I'm a bit exhausted just from the small. I'm waiting for the big resolution at the end, because I think for me that's gonna the closure and the understanding after the fact is what I'm looking at. So thank you for that short update on what's going on, I guess. We've had some other little shuffles, some roster moves, a pack of roster moves, if you will. That's a wolf joke, because all the wolf logo teams or animal related teams seem to be involved. We'll start with Vertex. So Tensai has stepped down from the lineup, citing an indefinite break unless a really good offer comes up. I saw some people taking the piss he's going to Valorant, but I don't know that. So that's happened. And we already know that Soju has left the roster. So there's a little bit of not quite sure where this roster's headed at the moment. It sounded like after the interview from their ANZ Champs game this week that Your Wombat is definite. Well, I'm not going to say definitely, but it sounds like that they're trying to integrate him into the team. And that would indicate they may be keeping him long term. But at the same time, I don't feel like this is their final roster, and they definitely don't have a solid five. Stating that they're going to keep looking for one at the moment.
Yeah, so worth noting is that since these roster changes have taken place, Vertex have played 2 games. One of them was tonight, before we recorded, against Simplicity, which they took out 16-6. We got to see a great interview there from Smooth Crim and Brace, where he didn't realize that in order for your AirPods to be able to hear, you have to take the headphones on top of them.
Couldn't hear us. He was wearing AirPods.
That's a great clip though. So certainly go back and watch that if you want to have a good laugh. But a really strong looking game from Vertex overall. Again, Simplicity, probably one of those lower lineups in terms of what you're seeing in ANZ Champs. They're definitely not in that top echelon of teams that Vertex you could arguably put them in, and last year you definitely could have put them in. But overall, some pretty good form from them. They were able to get a relatively easy game, 16-6 on Overpass best of 1. So they'll be going up ahead into the next round of things, which is So
sorry.
But bit of a tangent there. But the thing with that is that they had Smooth Crim as a substitute. And they played really well with him, but he, in that interview, made it clear that he doesn't want to come back to CS full time. He's done that era of his life, and he wants to move on to bigger and better things, he said. And in the game before that they played in ESEA Premier versus Caught Off Guard, which they won 2-0, they had Chus and KO as subs. KO definitely a sub. I'm not sure what's happening with Chus in terms of...
Chus just can't play on the roster because he's already playing with another team in ANZ Champs. So... that's why they can't use him on Vertex, right, despite making the change outside of the event. That's why that is the way it is.
Yeah, look, it's a really weird situation for Vert overall, I think. They're just in a bit of a rough position, but for them, let's hope that they'll be able to get themselves into a good spot. So that was Tensai leaving Vertex, but Soju as well. Also stepping down from the Vertex roster, and has actually stepped up to join the other Wolf team, Dire Wolves.
Exactly. And he's gone in to replace APOC, right? So APOC left the lineup. We'll get to where he's gone. But Soju toward the end of last year sort of had this CS wasn't really. I'm not going to say it's not for him. I don't have exactly what he said, but his passion for actually playing the game was waning, and this has now, after being with Vertex initially as their coach, and then following what's happened, has then been playing with the squad, whether it was players on now Direwolves or his ex-teammates with Vertex. His passion for playing has been, somewhat reignited. So always a fan of Soju, so I'm excited to see. I think the Direwolves team, based on some results that we'll get into, and in comparison to some other teams that also made changes, I think they're going to be better off.
Yeah, 100%.
They're going to be better off compared to the other teams. I'm not necessarily sure yet in comparison to 2020, 2019, but given the current field, they're looking fine, despite the loss of APOC, who is a very strong player and who's off to Animal Squad. Did you catch the ANZ Champ game on Nuke?
Oh, I don't think I was able to quite catch that one.
APOC had a monster of a game. He got MVP for the week, I think, off of the game. But
really,
APOC is APOC, man. He's looking good. This Animal Squad lineup is scary. There's actually some. They referred to the squad on the broadcast as some boomers on this team, but there are some vintage names and players on this team, and I think they're almost like a dark horse team that'll just steal some wins away from you.
I feel disappointed I didn't get to catch that game now.
Good. Do you have any other thoughts about this Animal Squad lineup as a whole?
Look, so far, they're looking very strong. Again, as you said, there's a lot of names on there that are looking quite good. And I think now with the addition of APOC as well, they're just kind of bolstering that. It's probably, in looking at it, it's actually a really good move for him after coming off Direwolves in terms of what other teams he could have gone to. I think that's going to be probably one of the strongest choices that could have been made there. I think everyone really here is largely upgrading with a lot of these moves. Maybe except Vert, because I don't know about how the lack of Soju will help them. But again, these other players coming in, they look like they've been really sharp. They've been able to frag out pretty well. So I guess we'll see how Vertex goes. But as for Direwolves, we can definitely consider them to be towards the top end of the scene as far as results are going. They look very promising. I'm very keen to see how they go and perform from here on out.
Yeah. These Silex moves, I'm going to be honest, I just have no idea who these players are. Walk us through it.
Yeah, so not much to go over here, but Silex, there's a bit of uncertainty over Twitter because Mega, the team's IGL, in the last episode, you might recall, was looking for one player at that point after a player dropped out. But then there were also tweets from him saying that they were just going to pug out the season. From what I can gather of this, that is no longer the case. So what has happened in that regard is that basically they picked up 2 new players where Keo has come in. So Keo, pretty sharp. He's had a quite the rise from through the lower scene, ends of the scene up towards the top over the last few months. He's been really sharp, being really fragging out. And overall, nice guy to chat with as well and all that. Shout out to Kier for clarifying someone's situation for me.
We do love it when you guys help us to clarify it because the players do know what's going on.
It was a bit weird to see from the outsiders to looking into this team, but a bit of insight there. So Seeker was out and Papadoxy's come in, and the Night Raid's also out of the team. Kier's stepping in there. They're pracking hard. They're doing what they can. They've been one of the teams that have seen quite the rise, I think, post ESIC bans, where because these slots have moved up, they've been able to. Well, I think I said back in the first episode how there would be a new wave of teams coming through to seize these opportunities as the ESIC bans have come through. And almost 2 months later, that's proving to be true, where there are a lot of teams now that are being given opportunities that they previously wouldn't have been able to even try and go for. And now they're able to show some of their potential and get a bigger stage to play on.
Definitely.
It's one of the good things to come out of that unfortunate
it's a silver lining at least.
Big clusterfuck over there with the ESIC bans. So
yeah, definitely. I think that's everything news-wise and roster-wise, at least. So we'll jump into some of the event stuff, and this is jam loaded this week, as usual, I guess.
Yes.
But do we want to talk LPL? Not a lot. Pro. So Pro's been delayed again, right?
Yeah, so Pro has been delayed to start March 23rd.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a shame, but again, it makes some sense given the whole roster situation, enables a bit more time for some of that to cool down and things like that. But given a lot of these teams are already playing the other leagues, I don't know how much that will help. But hey, at least it's something. At least it's a bone being thrown to them, right? Challenger, on the other hand, and the lower leagues have been going ahead. Won't spend too much time on the other lower leagues like Evolution down, but Challenger, on the other hand, has had main broadcast on the main LPL Twitch channel, and that's been going on. So if you're interested in watching a bit more CS, from a bit of the lower or like mid range of the AU scene, absolutely worth supporting. Having a look at some of these players, because there are definitely talents that, like, again, all of through here is how up and coming talent comes through, and that's certainly happened a lot in the last however long. Because of these bans. So Challenger at the moment, as of right now, there are two teams that are tied for first place position on the ladder. That is BBB, MB, CBS. That's an amazing name. And Modify Esports, which is a little bit easier to say, has a bit less syllables in it. They're both currently tied at the top of the ladder with 3 wins each, but matches are ongoing. Matches have been scheduled. So definitely have a look there if you're interested in seeing some LPL Challenger. But yeah, Pro March 23rd, I'll be pretty keen to see some of those top teams playing there. I think we covered a bit of that before, but yeah.
I'm a big fan of BBB, MB, CBS, but unfortunately, they're not in ESEA Premier. So I don't really get to watch a lot of my favorite team.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, that is BBB, MB, CBS. It's just so funny to say.
I really want to know like what that stands
It's probably something very inappropriate. So ignorance is bliss.
I still want to know.
Fair. We'll jump into some Premier. I've never watched so much Premier, but this season's been really good so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since the last episode, they've finished playing all their games. They've played everyone once, which I'm pretty sure is the format. And they didn't drop a single. I don't know if they didn't drop a single map even. I think they were all 2-0 wins. So recently that was against COG, caught off guard. Vertex they beat, Simplicity they beat, as well as Dynasty, and then their last win was a forfeit from Rooster. I think that really, despite their group not having Chiefs or Direwolves in it, I think that really does sort of just cement where they're at the moment in terms of being a really strong team locally. And essentially, they've just had a perfect group run. In ANZ Champs, we're going to see when we get to them, they're still looking strong there. So for me, Order, they're cruising through that side of their group. In terms of other games in the last week, one that I do want to point out, the Riot Paradox game was really good. There was an OT map to kick it off. I'm pretty sure that was Paradox's pick and Riot won it. That was Vertigo. Then after that, Paradox sort of fought back on on Riot's pick. I think that was Train. And then it came down to a Dust 2 that was really good. Lots of 6 shots, a couple good strats, 16-10. It was stressful, but like good stressful to watch. And I think those teams, I did a piece about, I did a video and a piece where I did some rankings, and those two teams are on a very similar level for me. And I think we've spoken about it on past episodes too. They're they're sort of with Vertex, but just a little bit below. And I think watching these two teams carve out where they sit is really, really interesting to watch. There's a lot of cool players, lots of really interesting stuff going on with these two lineups. A lineup that's looking in a really tough spot, though, is the Chiefs. What are you? Where are you at? Because they've had some losses. What's the deal here?
So, since the last episode, where we've seen a bit more of Chiefs, before that, we'd seen them play against some of the lower tier teams, like some of the lower end of Premier, right? Because there is obviously like a bit of a split between what you consider to be that top echelon of
Yeah,
those,
definitely.
you know, those big name orgs and like all of that kind of stuff, right? And those big names that you know, and then the people who are able to get into Premier, but like that's kind of where they fall short a bit, right? That's just how it tends to go. But in the games with Chiefs, where they were able to play against some of those lower teams, they were looking pretty good. They were looking pretty on form. But it's where they were playing those higher tier teams that they just started to crumble, where they just started to fall apart, really. So we saw them lose. The last game they played was against Dire Wolves. And that game, I believe, went to Dire Wolves. That was a 2-0 win to them. I was thinking that if Chiefs were really in this standing where they were able to play, like, at, you know, like where we'd hope they would be, right?
You got to be taking at least a map, right? Like,
exactly. I expected at least a map win from Chiefs here. That's the thing, is that because we did ANZ predictions on Twitter. If anyone's been looking out on our social media feeds,
which you should
they're
be.
on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But
yeah,
where I put Chiefs as being one of the teams that are more likely to go 3-0 in ANZ Champs, I now firmly believe that is no longer the case.
Yeah, well, especially if they come up against Direwolves at any point, like you already know they've lost the head-to-head, so...
yeah, straight up. But not even against Direwolves. They lost to Paradox as well. It was a 1-2 loss. They at least took a map against Paradox, but Paradox have been looking pretty good, but still not in that, like, they shouldn't be winning against Chiefs, I don't think. I think that I would have expected, if I was predicting that game, for Paradox to maybe take a map. Yeah. But it's just been really weak showing from Chiefs lately, and I'm hoping that whatever internal issues they've got, especially given the fact they, again, did bring in those two newer players, so makes a bit of sense there as to why they're looking a little bit weaker, but I would have been hoping to see a bit of a stronger showing still. Definitely.
Like, I'm just looking back, that Mirage game, they let Direwolves get a 13-round T-side on Mirage. It's like, there's clearly, they're just not together yet. They're not rolling yet. And we know they can, because we'll get to ANZ Champs. But, dude, they put on a show there against the shit teams. That's rude. I shouldn't say shit teams, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Not shit teams, but the teams that they should be winning against.
They can definitely outclass the teams that are below them. So that's the concern at the moment. It's seeing Chiefs fall into the position where someone like Vertex was at the end of last year, and sort of Vertex moving up despite the stand-in. So in Premier they're playing with Chuz and KO. But they still took the dub against Caught Off Guard. Yeah. So I've just got COG in my notes. I had to, like, in my head, you heard me process. So I think it's really impressive and a good sign, at least, that, you know, Vertex can work with the changes. Whether their style is a little more suited to changes in the lineup. This is something I said about Direwolves. I think their players, that core, that team's mentality is more suited to lots of changes if it has to happen. But Vertex, I think they're still looking good. They're probably they'll get out of their group. They're 5-1 in their group with they've only lost to Order so far in Premier.
They're looking pretty good. Like, despite the instability, they're certainly still going far. Maybe not at the peak that they were last year, but I mean, with everything that's happened to them, you kind of can't blame them for that.
And then the last team I really have been keeping my eye on in Premier is, of course, the Direwolves. We spoke about the 2-0 against the Chiefs, which was very impressive, but they also took a 2-0 against Riot.
Yep.
Who, you know, I think they're a very decent team, middle of the pack. I would keep my eye on. I think, they're showing after their changes that they're going to be a team that can reach for the top and potentially hang up there. Whether it's with Order, whether it's with Renegades when they come back, wait and see. But really good signs for me, at least.
Yeah, 100%. That's pretty much what I'm thinking in a nutshell with all of that. Yeah.
We'll jump over to ANZ Champs. I very, very excited to have ANZ Champs back. The broadcast has been a lot of fun, very chill, lots of memes.
Oh, I love it.
But the big thing, I've covered this in a written piece on Snowball Esports. If you want to go check it out, if you'd rather read it, but there's also visual versions somewhere on the internet. Essentially, the format is very different this time around. So we're starting with a 16-team Swiss stage, similar to the opening stage of a major. I'll quickly run through that. So stage 1 has started this week on the 8th of March. So we're done through the first week. So everyone has played one game, and you need to win 3 to progress. You lose 3, you go out. And all of the deciding matches, I haven't 100%. I'm not sure if I've 100% got this right. I don't know if it's only the 2-2 matches or if it is any match that you can progress is a best of 3. Otherwise, everything's BO1. But from what I understand, if you're winning 2 games or if you've lost 2 games or you're 2-2, you play a best of 3. And then once you follow obviously how that bracket will play out, 8 teams will go forward, 8 teams will go home or stay home. And then that takes us to stage 2, where we have a double elimination bracket played over 2 weeks. Here, all games are definitely BO3. And that'll help us find 4 more teams, and that'll take us to the playoffs, which is just a single elim bracket played out in 1 week. Best of 3 for the 2 quarterfinal or semi-final games, and then a BO5 grand final, which I think when we do get there, and this format really lends itself to, we will probably have the 2 strongest teams in those playoffs.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
So I'm very excited. I think the other reason that we're going to see, and ANZ Champs is very exciting, is because the top team qualifies for an event called the ESL National Championships Global Playoffs Spring 2021. Ridiculous. Essentially, every country's ANZ Champs, so the German one and the Spanish one or whatever. The winner of all of those go to a tournament, and they play that, and that gives you entry to stuff like Cologne, or I think second place is an unannounced IEM event. So lots to talk about there. They also moved the games, so 4 games are played on a Monday, 4 games are played on a Thursday now. I say 4, but as the Swiss progresses, that will change, I think. But now that we've got 1 week in the bag, I think it's where do you want to start with that? I've really enjoyed this week of ANZ Champs.
Yeah, ANZ Champs, look, it's always a treat to watch, honestly. I think I've said it before, definitely on this show, but I think it's by far the most polished product of Australian CS that we get to see.
Yeah, definitely.
We get the whole big production, we get the whole studio type setup. We have Mac, Elfish Guy, Pilsky, Karathal on the broadcast. Really great guys, make it very enjoyable, right? Everything about ANZ Champs is just really fun to watch, including the games. And as we get into the games as well, there's been a lot of really interesting stuff coming through. So we had a few of the less predictable games on Thursday, but in the Monday games, it was a little bit more the way I suppose you would expect it to go, right? Where you had so it was Order taking their game 16-5 against ESEA, which was renamed on broadcast, I'm pretty sure. But that's a HLTV name. That's where I sourced these match results, so you have to deal with that. Paradox taking this 16-5 win against Ninja. Chiefs with the 16-3 against Power Rangers, and Direwolves with that forfeit win against Team DOGE, as we talked about before. So that's where results went on Monday. I think that was all pretty predictable.
That was, the way they seeded. That was the invited teams against the teams who qualified in the final qualification week. Yeah. So it was very expected.
Yeah, no, I don't think there was anything there that really you could say that was unexpected whatsoever. All these very one-sided results. Thursday, that being today's matches, were a lot more interesting in terms of, so Animal Squad opening up with the 16-9 win against Dynasty. Again, getting to see Apox debut on that roster and getting to see how they'd frag out. Spoiler, they did very well.
Very well.
Bizarre with the 16-6 against Overperformers. Riot actually getting caught off guard, if you will. Caught off guard. With a little bit of an upset. I think a lot of people were expecting the game to go a lot more in Riot's way, myself included. I put my channel points on Riot.
A lot of channel points were lost.
Yeah, my channel points are all gone. Rest in peace. But that was a 16-6 to Riot on Dust 2, which just look, I'm not exactly sure what happened in the Riot camp, but whatever was happening there, they just couldn't get themselves into the game on this particular occasion. Again, just not really what you wanted to see from them, but hopefully they'll bounce back. Hopefully we'll get to see some stronger performances from them as the season goes on. And then finally we had Vertex versus Simplicity, which was a very fun game to watch because we got to see that debut of Wombat on... was it Wombat played that one, right? Yeah,
Wombat played and Smooth.
Yeah, it was Wombat and Smooth Crim on Vertex, and I have to say it's a shame that Smooth Crim isn't sticking around on Vertex because very fun player to watch a lot of the time, but understandable. He's got his own life stuff to deal with.
100%.
Outside of the game, so good on him. But
if you had to pick a favorite match from the week, what are you going with? Because for me, it's got to be one of those last two. It's got to be the Riot Caught Off Guard game, or I really, really liked that Vertex game. It wasn't very close, but it was just really exciting to see.
Out of ANZ Champs, the most interesting game of that, I think, was probably the Riot Caught Off Guard game because it just went so one-sided in the way you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, definitely.
But also the Vertex game, be close second. And honestly, probably just almost to that first position by that interview at the end alone. So
yeah,
some really interesting stuff coming out of ANZ Champs this week, and we've also got next week's matchups.
We've got the first four because we don't have the. So essentially, the first night will be all the teams who are 1-0. And I didn't put them in the notes, but I've got the photo. So kick off with Direwolves and Animal Squad, which I think will be a banger. Like that's APOC's old team versus APOC.
Yeah, that's what I'm really keen to see as well because like APOC is looking really sharp on Animal Squad, as you said before. It looks like that roster is looking pretty sharp. But then again, Direwolves at the same time, they haven't dropped a beat throughout their time with bringing on Soju in the last week or so that they've had him, right? They've looked really unstoppable and like they're gutting for that. They're kind of like after Order in terms of trying to get themselves that first place position. And by the way, that's a match I want to see eventually, Direwolves versus Order. I would love to see a head-to-head.
That'd be absolute cracker.
Not getting it right now. We're getting Direwolves versus Animal Squad. I think it'll go the way of Direwolves, but I wouldn't be... these are best of threes, right?
These are BO1s, I believe.
Right. Okay. So BO1s, I would probably say Direwolves will take that one, but it all comes down to the map pick.
Definitely.
But I wouldn't be surprised at the same time if we did see an upset, given how Animal Squad have looked. They're in a prime position to be able to take it.
These games will all be a lot closer as well.
Oh yeah, no, these are way better games.
Definitely.
Starting out next week. So next game is Chiefs versus Vertex. And that's going to be a really interesting one to see because Vertex, as they've been looking in a strong position, they're getting their kind of roster shit sorted, right? Chiefs have been on the other end where they kind of have been looking a bit more loose lately and where they have, they've taken those losses to Paradox, they've taken that loss to Direwolves, where they just kind of been bodied in those last few games. It'd be good to see if in the time between now and the next matchup, with having this time to be able to study up on their opponent, being able to practice this out and get it out before Monday, will Chiefs be able to succeed against Vertex? Will Vertex be able to prevail? I'd say this one's pretty close, but it's kind of up in the air. I don't really think we can predict it. It's going to be close if it is. Yeah. I think that says it pretty well. Order versus Caught Off Guard.
I think this is going to be really interesting because I don't think Caught Off Guard are anywhere near Order's sort of caliber. But I think now, for my money, Order are having this run. The mental shit starts to come in. If they drop any game from here on out, especially to a lower ranked team, what's going on? So all it takes is Caught Off Guard to do their homework and just play well on one map, and they could be this ridiculous upset, right? I don't think it's going to happen. I'm like, if I had to sink all my channel points into a game, I'm taking Order. 100%. It's just the form they're in, Vexite, the caliber of player like against Caught Off Guard. I just don't think that match up at all. It's just Order every day.
Yeah, 100%. I think that Order 100% looking to be... I personally am of the belief that Order are the top team in OC at the moment, if you exclude Renegades. I think that's not a too unpopular opinion. The only person that I've seen kind of like shrug their head at that and go, well, hang on a moment, is when I said that in Conky's chat yesterday.
Yeah,
we kind of said,
right.
well, look at Direwolves. But for me, I don't think we've seen enough of Direwolves with Soju to warrant calling them first when Order have just looked this strong.
I'm
That's
going
my
the
opinion
other
at
way.
least.
There's a world where Order like Renegades come back and Order are like on their tail. I see that happening, but time will tell.
Yeah, Paradox versus Bazaar.
This is a bizarre matchup, in the sense that I don't know if any of these teams like I would have ever picked to be starting off the Swiss 2-0, but I only really think of like 3 teams, like the Direwolves, Chiefs, Order. They're like my 3 teams, so someone else has to be 2-0. But it's a little unfortunate. Bazaar were impressive in their game today, but again, it was against a team that isn't quite on the same level as these other squads, and it's again, they're getting out of the other 3 options they had. They're getting Paradox, which I would argue is the easiest outside of maybe the Chiefs. But, I don't really know with this matchup. If I had to, pick, I'd probably just say Paradox is the safer bet, just on recent form, Premier. I'm not sure if they've had a head-to-head matchup lately. But
I don't think so. Not since roster changes have taken place.
Exactly.
So I have to agree though. I think Paradox look a little bit better, but it's still kind of up in the air. A lot of these matches are.
Yeah. And otherwise, we don't
predict these.
100. Well, I think the losers, the 0-1 matches are going to be really interesting, and one team is going to get a freebie. So what I mentioned earlier, I must explain why I said this will iron out. So obviously with DOGE forfeiting all their matches from here on out, they automatically finish 0-3. And what that means is for the next 2 like Swiss bits, someone's going to get a free win. But as soon as the other team goes out 0-3 and the 2 3-0 teams go through, it's fine again. So it's just really unfortunate that Direwolves have got the first. 2 more teams are going to get handed a win without having to play, which is good. You get to progress, but at the same time, you don't get to play.
It's a shame as well because I was looking forward to seeing Doge play. They were looking like they were in a good form too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that is how it is.
And that is, I think, ANZ Champs for the time being. There's not really much else to look at, but it's super exciting. I would employ anyone who hasn't, check out some of the games, check out the VODs because it's funny, it's really exciting. I really, really like the player cam stuff they're doing as well.
And definitely watch the games on Monday as well. First game, Direwolves versus Animal Squad, is currently slated for 6 p.m. ADT. So go check that one out as well.
For sure.
Go watch the broadcast. It's a lot of fun.
And say hey to Luther and I in the chat because we're always in there.
Of course.
We'll jump over to our 2 squads overseas right now. This is sort of, I think this will be quick because there's not a lot to say outside of, I don't really think either of these teams are doing very well. So we'll start with EXTREMUM. They're playing in the Pinnacle Cup. If just the quickest way to describe what that event is, it's pretty much the same as the Snow Sweet Snow in terms of it's just a bunch of like tier 2 European teams, and then there's like some teams from overseas that are there. So, like the Brazilians playing on Godsend. I think it's Taco's team. They're there. That's the level we're talking about. They like came off their last event in trouble. They didn't get through the group stage. And now we're going over Pinnacle Cup and we're saying, if we want these guys, our heroes of Australia, to be kicking it back into gear, it needs to sort of start happening now. And they won their opening game against Whistler Krakow, who I believe they beat at Snow Sweet Snow. And that put them 1-0 in a Swiss stage, so another Swiss format. And since then, they have had these weird losses. I believe they were both 2-1 losses to Saw and Sinners. Saw is like a Spanish team of there's not really anyone on the roster. The ex-Giants, I think. And Sinners, I've never heard of these guys. Are the alarms going off for you? Like, are you worried about EXTREMUM?
Yeah. There's no other way to say it. They are looking like they're not in at all a good position right now. Something has to change. I just don't see like they've been together for back playing for over a month now, and they've been just playing these smaller events and stuff like that. And if they're struggling against teams like this, then how are they going to go playing in the bigger tournaments that they used to be in? Like,
Yeah.
I think the whole storyline of this current team going from 100 Thieves, or even when they were picked up by 100 Thieves throughout the story there, where they got picked up because they had a top 4 place at one of the last majors.
Yeah.
And then it's so sad to just see them go from that peak to then going to 100 Thieves to now going to EXTREMUM, and just the quality of players just declined so much. There's something going up wrong there.
Do you think if you could pluck Renegades out of Pro League, this is just an example because I can't think of another way to create this, and then you just drop them in there. Do you think they play it better against top teams? Because I have this worry that they're playing against these teams that they have like just no practice against. They're random teams. The meta is probably different at a lower rank, and it's just going to create this snowballing effect where if they get into like a negative feedback loop because they can't beat these lower teams, they're not going to get invited. I do feel like they will play against the top teams better because they have the experience there. Maybe not Bentet, but I don't know how they get there, and I think they just need to get out of this sort of rut right now. I don't really think you can be a top 10 team in the world and, shit the bed at these events. I think if Australis rocked up at one of these events, they would at least get through the group stage.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say that was a terrible pun you made.
Yeah.
Snowballing.
I thought it was good. I'll work on it.
But, as you said, though, if Renegades is playing this, I personally think from at least watching them, they're currently playing in ESL Pro League, which we'll talk about in a sec, but they're playing against better teams, and even though they're not winning their games, they're at least getting it a lot closer. Yeah. And it seems like when you watch them play in EU, they're at least actually getting better and finding better form with every game that they're playing. Like, they're actually learning something from their opponents.
I think in a weird, messed up way, if you swapped the two teams around in the events they're playing, I think Renegades would play really well in the Pinnacle Cup, and I think EXTREMUM would, win some maps, take some series at Pro League. It doesn't make sense, but it's just, I think part of me really just knows EXTREMUM are better than this. Which is why it stinks,
Of course EXTREMUM are better than this. It's just that they're not showing it. I mean, look, these are players that have had years and years of experience, especially towards the top end. And even with the newer additions of Liaz and Grat, who have now been overseas for years playing, because those moves were ages ago now, where they've been able to settle in and things like that. I think there should be something a bit better happening here. I think that it should be a bit closer. I think they should be able to go into an event like this and, I think I think them at their peak, if they were playing an event like this, they would easily win it and crush everyone else.
Yeah.
But that's not happening. They're being crushed, and it sucks to see. It really does. It's depressing, man. Like,
Well, I'm sure that watching Pro League didn't make you any happier.
Not really.
So, really. I've been reading a lot that everyone's saying Malta's the IGL, but as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen it from the team. So I don't know. I don't want to say it would make sense to me. My 2 cents on it was I think it either him or Sicko, but Malta makes more sense. But whoever is the IGL and whatever is going on chemistry wise with the team practice, it's not giving them results again. And that was the thing for me. The Katowice finished. I said, look, they were playing Puggy. Their T-sides were absolute hot garbage. But you've got, 10 days to sort it out. Do your prac, do your homework. And then, their Pro League group was great. They go into a group where, yes, lots of strong teams, lots of strong players, but similar positions to them. Heaps of roster changes, heaps of teams that aren't very clear on what their direction is. OG, FPX, Complexity, not so much big. But these teams have identity issues, all kinds of different things going on, and they've just absolutely lost the plot. They haven't won a map yet. They lost to Heroic, FPX, and OG. It's not looking good.
It's not. It's the thing is, I think they are getting better with each game they're playing. It's clear that the EU prac is helping them. And
Yes.
I think that as far as I'm concerned with them, if they keep spending their time in EU and they continue with the boot camp, and because we don't know when they're coming back at this point, it's unclear as to like, do they even have a plan to get back? We saw interviews lately where they actually don't really have anything set in stone. It's kind of ridiculous. Yeah. Like they could be stuck in EU up until September, and that would be, on a personal level, that would be really shit for them. Like being stuck away from home, and you'd absolutely have to feel for them there. But there is a silver lining in the fact that if at the very least they are forced to stay in EU, their Counter-Strike will improve.
As a Counter-Strike player, it's a good place to be.
Exactly. Right now, EU is where everything's popping off, where the best teams are currently at, where they've got the most vibrant scene at the moment. Renegades playing in EU will continue to benefit them from every scrim they play against these teams, from every demo review they do while they're over there, of them having played officials against these top teams, from having that experience. It helps them hugely being able to play against international teams. It's something that they've lacked for the last year.
Exactly.
And the fact that they have lacked that for the last year, I'd say they're doing okay given the fact that they've been stuck domestically for so long. But at the same time, I kind of wish that we could see just a little bit higher,
It's tragic in the sense that they're going over, they're in Europe now. They're going to come back home with all that European practice and probably destroy everybody again.
Oh,
but then,
without doubt.
But then it's like, I don't know if going to Europe to get, demolished by European teams just to come home to win here again, even though you already were, is like worth. They've still got 2 games to play. They've still got 2 more BO3s. I don't think they can physically math their way out of their group. I don't think they progress. But they've got a series tonight against Complexity,
which will have already happened by the time you see this episode.
Yes. And then they'll have 1 more against Big. But if I going into the group, I would have said that Big and Complexity are 2 of the harder ones. I would have picked that they had a better chance against teams like Heroic and OG, who have just made massive changes. So I don't think that they necessarily have, just in terms of their Counter-Strike, from what it looks like, they don't have a massive plan, unless their plan is to play very chaotic Counter-Strike. But long term, especially in Europe, I don't think that's not the schmoove if you want to be if you want to sort of carve out a place in the rankings. I think that's a good way to cheese into the top 20. But that's not the Renegades we saw at the beginning of 2020 in Leipzig and at Katowice.
It's unfortunate, but I think a year of not being able to play internationally will definitely do that.
Do that too, for sure.
I'm just hoping that the longer they stay there, the better they can get, that they can rebound pretty much.
Oh, of course. They're one of these teams who've not Renegades, but the core of the players. They've had a very sort of long tenured career, right? And we've seen them go overseas before. Obviously, having Dexter leave is doing not a lot of good work for them, but bringing Ali in has been, I guess we'll see where they go. But you have been doing so much research on aliStair.
Oh, just a little bit, yeah. So
much. So that's what I understand your feature is about. You've been telling me about it. I am actually super, super excited to see what you've put together. I don't know if you put the intro into the feature already or not, but if not, tell us a little bit about it. Otherwise, just play it.
I'll give you a little bit of a thing, but basically what I've been doing, and I've been working on this on and off for about the last month, since I last was working on the feature piece and stuff like that, on and off, but especially ramping up in the last 2 weeks, writing the script for this and all that. This feature is all about aliStair's career in OC before heading over to EU, and basically how he's built up from this fresh player and this fresh face, starting out on a roster very new to that kind of thing back in back at the beginning of 2016, and how he's kind of come to the point where now he's looking ready to go play overseas, where he's looking to be like, the title says it, Australia's next Prodigy.
Hell yeah.
So I guess I'll just roll that now. I hope you enjoy it. It's been a culmination of a lot of effort over the past however long I've been working on it. So really hope you enjoy this one, and we'll catch you in about 20 minutes or so. If you're at all a fan of Oceanic Counter-Strike, you know the name Renegades well. Despite being a North American organization, their deep roots in Aussie CS run far, originating from the signing of the former Vox Eminor roster and taking them overseas and growing them into the boys that we know today. With their next pickup after the departure of their CSGO lineup for 100 Thieves, it seemed that the former Greyhound roster would be due next to compete on an international stage, sending more of our scene abroad for regular competition overseas. That would have been the case if it wasn't for the course of events that 2020 delivered. Stuck home in a scene where the competition is a whole tier below pretty much, Renegades crushed 2020's local circuit. With the brain of Dexter at the helm of the team from the IGL position, they would go on to win all but 3 of the 44 matches they played in Australia during the year. It was a streak that did not go unnoticed, especially by international teams looking to boost their potential for the year ahead. With Dexter being offered a position to replace Carrigan on the Mouse Sports lineup, he has had big shoes to fill. Likewise, the Renegades lineup was left with a massive gap, and they needed a pickup ready to compete on an international stage. With a lot going on in Oceania, including the ESIC bans taking out a large portion of the Tier 2 scene, alongside the smaller sized pool of players in the AU scene compared to other regions, a problem we've always faced, finding the perfect replacement wouldn't be easy. There's a lot of requirements to fill in order to land a spot on a team like that, especially with an outgoing in-game leader. While there's good reason to just pick up another IGL and try to slot in a similar piece, there's plenty of room here to mix things up, change the roles around. So if the new IGL can be found within the lineup, what else do you need for a new 5th? Well, you need someone who is dedicated, someone with experience who can mesh well with the existing lineup. Pre-existing experience with them helping a lot here, especially in a scene as close and tight-knit as this one. You need someone who can commit to playing CS full-time and is keen to compete against the best of the world has on offer. They need to be a smart player with a team-oriented goal, a talent with the willpower to put in the time and effort to practically revolve their life around CS in order to pursue their dream. And if you want to succeed and boost your fragging power, or quite frankly, you need someone who's fucking sharp. aliStair is that player.
To fade. You see 2 trying to hide inside of it, but aliStair has the eyes of an eagle.
What is that?
And a bow similar to Legolas. He's hitting everything.
5 blitzers thinking about it, but now is forced off the angle. What is that from aliStair? No
What
way.
was that?
What? That is by far the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
Meet aliStair Johnston, in-game name simply aliStair, a 22-year-old Australian CSGO player who served as quite the familiar face for many in the local scene. And it's no surprise that he's a familiar face, given the number of star-studded lineups that he's been a part of during his career over the last few years. In order to get a sense of how Ali got to this point, let's rewind a few years just to see how it all got started. Having played at some local landslide events, starting to make friends and build relationships in the scene, the story of aliStair's rise in Oceanic Counter-Strike starts with his first big opportunity, coming together with Stige, INZ, Urcast, and Gratisfaction to form the debut roster for a brand new organization, Corvidae. In a way, it's been weird looking back on these old rosters. I mean, reading these names out loud, you would think of players with an esteemed history in the Australian scene, where 4 of these players would go on to climb to the top of what OC had on offer. But back then, these players were undiscovered talents, eager to make a name for themselves. Cybergamer's main league, CG Premier, being the main focus of the team, a lot of importance was placed on getting themselves at the CGPL Autumn 2016 Finals LAN, with the goal of fighting against the teams currently under the domestic spotlight. As newer players with less structure holding them together, they wouldn't have for themselves a set IGL, and actually instead let INZ, Urcast, and Steed just alternate the role of shot calling. But their inexperience wouldn't hold them back for the time being. They were keen to just get in the server and frag. Losing to the top team at the time, Immunity, but then taking wins against Vox, Jam, Ferox, and Trident, they placed well in the online groups and earned themselves a ticket to Sydney for finals. For Corvidae, this would be the first LAN they would attend, and in fact would be the first LAN that INZ would ever attend. aliStair, having had experience playing in local landslide events, was at least a little bit more experienced in this regard, but nothing would prepare them or the scene at large for what would come next.
Bomb down here as well. So, tense moments here for APOC, a 1 versus 3. We'll see if he can do it. Doesn't manage to land the good shots there, and it is going to be Corvidae. I think someone might have just thrown a phone. But, wow. Excitement across the board here for Corvidae. And they're going to come out of Group A in first place. 16-14 against Legacy. Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? Not I, to be honest. I had my money on Legacy for that map. Corvidae, wow, that's something as well.
Huge.
And I mean, they're really the Cinderella story.
They are.
It is. I mean, they've come from from the bottom. Now we're here. The whole team's here.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's still a little bit more left in this.
With a 3-0 lead in the groups, including a 16-14 win on Mirage against Legacy, Corvidae would go on to the playoff bracket, seeded up against one of the top teams at the time, Chiefs, an organisation that cemented itself at the heart of Oceanic Esports, and a roster with players like Dexter and Burner UK that have done the very same in our CS scene. And this is where the God Run ended for Corvidae, as they went down 2-0 on Cash and Train. While Corvidae didn't get themselves a first place position, what they managed to accomplish was the respect of their competitors and spectators, breaking away from other newly formed teams and showing that they were here for serious business. These players were new to the top end of the scene, but they were ready for it and ready to do whatever it takes to win. But for aliStair, doing whatever it took to win would come with some heavy decisions. From the outsider perspective, everything was doing just fine in the Corvidae camp, but soon after the CGP LAN, internal problems began brewing. With a lack of a coherent structure, coupled with apparent issues in scrims, things weren't going the way it seemed they would after their top 4 finish. With roster shuffles and OCE leading aliStair out of his position at Legacy, he decided to scout some top talent to build a new roster, and in his sightline was aliStair and INZ. aliStair and INZ were caught trialing for lightstep's new team, a direct violation of their Corvidae contract. And with that, Corvidae fell apart with the other players being released as the duo left for greener pastures.
Back then I was really hurt because I thought like, oh, we're like really good friends. I even raged them out the game. Okay, never talk to me again. Okay, bro, we're done.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd love to see the chat logs
I
of
swear,
that.
I swear I used to hate them. Like, not like hate them, like I'm gonna kill them, but I'm never gonna play with them hate, you know? Yeah, but you know, after a few lands, we just had a few drinks, and I'm like, okay, I love you, buddy, man. It was all for passion, man.
Fair enough.
Understandable.
Okay.
That's like really understandable, to be honest.
A promising team with some of AUCS's finest talents, torn apart, leaving their former teammates hurt. But from the ashes of this team came together the rebirth of these players across new rosters and opportunities. And as for aliStair, he found that opportunity to thrive with INZ, Lightstep, Tux, and Malta on Team ASDF in June 2016. While there were some shaky results at first, with a 5th to 8th place finish at the first ESL ANZ Champs season's group stage after losing to Trident, it wouldn't be long before the ASDF boys would show that they were ready to compete at the top domestically. With a star-studded lineup and more experience brought in from Lightstep's guidance and leadership, they'd go on to turn some heads while under the ASDF name, starting with a qualification to the CGP Season 8 LAN with a 5-0 placement in their group, winning best of 3s against Infa, SYF, Avant, Reload, and Legacy, and only dropping one map to Avant in the process. They'd also go on to win Season 22 of ESEA Open in Australia, beating Atletico and Chiefs and qualifying for the ESEA Global Challenge. But it's worth noting that the Chiefs lineup they beat to get there wasn't to last. They were already planning a split, announced a week prior, with ESEA as their last tournament to play. The core of that team, Burner UK, Destiny, and Gaza, would join James and Gratisfaction in a new venture to soon become the new Team Immunity. But that left Chiefs with a lack of a CSGO team. And as the saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them, or have them join your organization. ASDF would join Chiefs the very next day after defeating their former roster. Seriously, the next day. The finals match was on August 16th, and they joined the 17th. But what a pickup that would be for the Chiefs. Playing the CGP LAN that they qualified for as ASDF, aliStair and his team would go on to place 3rd to 4th, debuting under their new organization. Just a week later, they'd travel to Katowice, Poland to compete in the ESEA Season 22 Global Challenge. This would be the first time Ali would travel internationally for CSGO and would be his very first taste of international competition. But they'd fall to Echo Fox and ENZ, showing that they could get some close BO1s in, but not taking any wins. They fell in the groups. But that edge from going global helped them when they got home, rounding out their 2016, placing strong at the ESL ANZ Championship's second season, placing 2nd at LAN in Melbourne, losing the finals to Atletico and losing to Atletico again soon after to place 3rd to 4th in the next season of ESEA Premier. For the next year, aliStair would stay put in Chiefs, playing through a rougher 2017, which saw the rise of more teams nationally and saw some of the biggest changes, developments, but also achievements for Ali and his teammates. It would start with Lightstep stepping down and Pex coming in as his replacement. And they'd started out by grabbing themselves a trophy, CGP Season 10. And that would soon be followed up by the announcement of a new event that would shake up Oceania and our scene, IEM Sydney 2017. Even though IEM was taking place locally, the event was more a focus on international competition, with only 8 teams for this initial trial year. Teams who were competing overseas were invited, these being Astralis, FaZe, North, Optic, SK, and Renegades, who were joined by Vici, qualifying through the China qualifier. That meant for Oceania, there was just one spot left to grab. Ali and his fellow Chiefs players were adamant in making it through to this event. I mean, with the potential to play on stage in front of a home crowd, who wouldn't take that as a massive inspiration to try their best? Getting to the qualifiers final against Tainted Minds after sending them down to the lower bracket in the previous round, they would meet again for the finals, which Chiefs would ultimately take out. For those who weren't familiar with Oceanic competition and only watched international comps, this would be the point at which Chiefs would have an opportunity to show themselves to this larger audience on the main ESL stream at an IEM branded competition, taking games against both Renegades and North in the group stage, but also losing to Astralis and Optic. They would be positioned at 2-2, needing to take their rematch game against Optic in order to qualify for the playoffs. And despite their best efforts, they'd find themselves just 6 rounds short of the main stage, eliminated in a best of 1, 16-10 on train. But even still, these close results turned some heads, and it begs the question, why weren't we seeing more Chiefs internationally? It's simple. It's the unfortunate reality that faced the team throughout its lifespan. Tux, the in-game leader, was VAC banned. aliStair joined ASDF knowing this fact, but dedicated himself to this team knowing the knowledge and potential Tux would bring, and that proved to be true as they got brought onto Chiefs. But even still, that meant no matter how hard they tried, how much they wanted to, they couldn't even try to qualify for majors. But that didn't mean they wouldn't go as hard as they could, taking on all the other tournaments that they could go for. They'd do exactly that, and take out CGP Season 11 soon after, place well over multiple qualifiers, and overall strengthen their position as a top contender in ESEA. But when ESEA Premier Season 25 rolled around, they'd find themselves falling short of that top position at second, another impressive run short. That's when aliStair fell off against his former Corvidae brothers, Urcast and Gratisfaction, teaming up with Bernard Yoke, Prakim, and MoeCQ in the latest incarnation of their team, Greyhound. Greyhound would soon enough up their rivalry with Chiefs in CGP Season 12, eliminating Chiefs in 3rd place to make the grand finals, showing excellent form after a few roster moves, with Dexter and Dick Stacey replacing Prakim and Moe. By now, you can see the classic Greyhound lineup begin to take its form as familiar names start to come together. At this point, there was no overwhelmingly dominating team in OC. I mean, Chiefs, Athletico, Tainted Minds all stood up at the top of the scene, but Greyhound were proving themselves in the second half of 2017, ready to stand up at the top 2, foreshadowing their meteoric rise they would have in the following years. It was at this point where Chiefs would have themselves another strong competitor. But for Ali, he kept his head cool, and Chiefs regained form towards the end of the year, culminating in the top spot in ESEA Premier going their way. Once again, they'd qualify for the ESEA Global Challenge, earning another opportunity to play overseas. But it wasn't to last much longer for Ali. Inns, his longtime teammate of almost 2 years now, who had been by his side right from the beginning, would finally be leaving his position in December 2017, moving over to Tainted Minds. He'd play his final official with Chiefs in New York for the ESEA Global Challenge, where roster locks were already in place, but his replacement Texter was already playing with Chiefs, debuting at the CGP LAN at the end of 2017, which they would go on to win. There wasn't much left for aliStair on Chiefs. After 2 years of growth, Chiefs had provided aliStair with a platform to grow and to aim for the top, but for his next move, Ali would be able to claim it. In January 2018, Ali would transfer to Order, joining Liaz, Imagine, Hats, and Sicko. Over 2018, they would go on to fight at the top, right off the bat qualifying for the highest tier tournament Ali would have ever played up to that point, IEM Katowice 2018. While they wouldn't do too much damage here, placing 13th to 16th place, they'd impress later that year winning events domestically, taking out ESEA Premier Season 27 with a convincing 2-0 grand final against Tainted Minds. They'd also place second in ESL Pro League's APAC division. Over this period of time, Order continued to play in higher tier events overall, pushing Ali to newer and greater heights as the pressure mounted. It helped that alongside the growth of aliStair's skill and knowledge came the development of the scene at large. with more investment being put forth into the region overall, including seeing bigger sponsors, invest in organizations, and ESL continuing to expand their efforts in the scene with the continuation of MDL, ANZ Champs, and opportunities to play Pro League, as well as the annual return of IEM at Kudos Bank Arena, providing opportunities for players to play in the same servers locally as some of Counter-Strike's greats. OC was less of the scrappy, undeveloped scene from years past when Ali first picked up the game. Speaking of Sydney, aliStair would return to the event for the second year in a row. They'd qualify through the closed qualifier and join Greyhound, Chiefs, and Legacy, playing at the event with the total number of teams doubling to 16, and with further qualifiers being run internationally to fill out the other slots. Here, they'd go into 2-0 Legacy in the lower bracket and take a map of Cloud9, but ultimately bow out regardless, putting up another good run, but not quite getting there in the end. What would happen that year, though, would be Renegades, a team mostly made up of Australian players, coupled with an American and Norwegian, making it through to the quarterfinals and playing on stage in front of their home crowd, just narrowly losing to mousesports. A game that would change the perception of what many thought possible for AUCS. A game that brought our entire scene together as an entire crowd cheered onward, watching Nifty drop 50 on Inferno. A game just barely lost, down to a single 1v2 clutch that went away on train. It's not something you can attribute to statistics. It's absolutely something underneath, more symbolic in nature. But I firmly believe that event, and that run, and the months and years that followed, is when Australian CS had finally matured into a scene that could fully develop a multitude of international-ready players and teams. Greyhound, a team that many were watching with ever closer attention following this year's IEM, would perhaps become the team most inspired to rise above the shackles of Oceania and close that gap. Having gained international attention through defeating SK in the lower bracket and for Dick Stacey's tongue-in-cheek interviews, they would become the best our region had on offer in the next year and a half. As for aliStair, he too began playing internationally more regularly. After IEM, Order would continue strong placements over that period as well, going through 2018 with top finishes at a multitude of events. But in September, a huge period of change was about to take place for Order. Ins would make a return by Ali's side, trading Sicko to Tainted Minds. But a few short weeks later, an even bigger change would take place. Liaz would be joining Renegades in North America, leaving Order and being replaced by Zeph, where alongside Ali's former teammate Gratisfaction, he'd play with JKS, Azur, and Jacob. Two talents were scouted to go straight to NA, a massive move that sent shockwaves through the scene, leaving every talented player aiming to be next. And Ali was ready to show his worth, aiming to be that player. Playing ESL Pro League against international teams at the end of 2018, starting 2019 off fresh by winning MDL, winning ANZ Champs Season 8, Order was looking strong. They would just miss a slot at IEM Sydney, which Greyhound would take as the number of Oceanic slots lowered to just 2, one of which came from ANZ Champs results. Regardless, they'd go strong in almost every tournament they played, consistently placing within the top 4 at almost every domestic event that they would play. Over that year, the re-addition of Ins would prove to be a strong one as Order went on a tear throughout 2019. So strong, in fact, that he would be scouted to join Greyhound, replacing Urkast, who would be heading home to Mongolia as his study visa sadly expired. Urkast would play his final event with the squad at the Starlighter Berlin Major, which would also play host to Renegades, making it through to the playoffs of a major, the first ever accomplishment of this kind made by an Oceanic team. They would make a lasting impression on many, including the owner of esteemed North American organization 100 Thieves, Nadeshot, who would acquire the team from Renegades soon after. This massive move up would mean that Renegades, looking to keep their Oceanic fanbase, would be scouting another team from our region, and at this point, it was clear that Greyhound were their target. In January 2020, Renegades would sign the Hounds, but soon after, Dick Stacey would leave, citing eye issues as his main reason for stepping down. Once again, this roster looked over towards the second top Oceanic team, and sought out Hats, another one of aliStair's Order teammates. Throughout the year, Order would consistently place within the top 3 at every event they played. But with Renegades now at their peak, they couldn't climb to the top, and would place second to Renegades at every turn at 2020. With various roster changes leaving the roster of Valiance, Ustillo, Ricky, Gyra, and aliStair, Ali was left as the longest remaining player within the Order organization. Just as aliStair watched his teammates get their international opportunities over and over again, teammates he would rise alongside and help build up, he too would finally get his shot. As Renegades IGL Dexter would move to mousesports, it made sense for them to look again once more to the Order roster. With the former Greyhound gang now at the top of the scene, aliStair was at the helm of the team, trailing just behind, and looked on from a distance. But now, he's been given his opportunity to get in on the action and climb aboard the Renegades train. Because aliStair is no longer the fresh face to the OC scene that he was in that Corvidae roster 5 years ago. He's now a veteran of the scene and one of our finest talents. aliStair would leave behind the strongest Order lineup yet, having helped his teammates reach the top of the scene and dominate locally. With Renegades overseas, Order has been influenced heavily by the impact he's had, as they reign supreme as the best team on offer, while Renegades isn't home at least. And it's only fitting that another young talent would fill aliStair's shoes, with Vexide taking his place, a player at an even younger age at just 16. And it's clear that the Renegades boys are keen to play with Ali as much as he is keen to play with them. In a recent HLTV interview prior to the start of ESL Pro League, Malta said that, quote, aliStair is someone a few of us had worked with before and is such a good fit outside of the game, we knew we'd be able to work him into our silent system quickly. Honestly, a positive environment in which everyone gets along is the most underrated aspect of a team, and for me, it's more important than any other factor. It helps that he's mechanically one of the best players out there, so he can slot into any role or style if he takes the time to learn. Having played with Malta on Chiefs, Sicko and Hats on Order, with Inns by his side right from the start of his career on Corvidae, aliStair is reuniting with his former teammates for what is undoubtedly his strongest roster yet. The least experienced of the roster, but by far the most fitting piece, aliStair would make his debut at IM Katowice 2021, the first time he'd played internationally in quite some time.
Alright, Ali, when was the last time you went to Europe?
Europe? Wow. I couldn't even tell you. I don't even think my passport dates that far back, to be honest, but at least 2 years, I think.
When was the last time you travelled internationally?
To Dallas for MGL, that was end of 2019. So it's over a year, bro.
What do you have to say about that?
What a loser, man.
Facts, man, facts.
Even though I was there with him in Dallas, but...
He'd open up playing against the player he was replacing, with an opening match against Mouse Sports, now including Dexter. The game would go the way of Mouse narrowly at 16-14, but what we saw from that game was just the start of what is to come from this fresh pickup for Renegades. With only 2 weeks of having a new IGL and a new player, that's not too bad, especially for a team that's been stuck in Australia for the last year. We'll be seeing more from aliStair very soon, now on an Oceanic roster poised for regular international competition, and now playing in ESL Pro League against international teams right this week as we publish. Over 10,000 hours in game, years of effort, aliStair has dedicated himself to the game over the last few years. For 2 years, he played on Chiefs. For 3, he was on Order, waiting patiently as he grew and grinded. We're past those chapters, and now it's on aliStair to write the next one. But no matter how many twists and turns this next adventure takes him on, the Oceanic scene will stay here, ready to cheer him on and support him with everything we've got, just like we always have. As always, I've been Luther, also known as Two-Spiece, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's Roundup feature piece.
Awesome. Thank you so much for putting that together, Luther. That I think the feature is the best part of the show, and you keep making it harder for me to match the quality of what you're putting out. So that'll go up separately like all the other features do. And I think that's a really important piece of storytelling, if anything, about an amazing player in our region. So it's good to see him on Renegades, right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm really keen to see where Ali goes from here. And I think the end of it kind of signals that my feelings around how I'm really keen to see how aliStair performs and how we're all going to cheer him on as he continues in his career. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun looking into how he's been going and how learned a lot of stuff about AUCS I had no idea about while doing all that. It was very fun putting that together. But yeah.
Hell yeah. That brings us to the end of the episode. So sadly, I guess you have to wait another 2 weeks for us.
Oh, no.
But we appreciate everybody waiting an extra couple of days and bearing with us while we, released on a Friday now. And again, that's just because we want to capture all of the amazing Premier games that we were missing, as well as ANZ Champs. It was ANZ Champs was sort of the little extra incentive to push it back a little.
Yeah, exactly.
But otherwise, I think, the support we're getting from everybody, as well as just, the ongoing stuff, help from Snowball, but most importantly, the recent stuff from Blue and that collaboration has been very, I don't know. I just don't have a word to describe it. It's just really it's really fucking cool. Like,
Yeah, no, it is.
So we really appreciate everyone who's watching along on YouTube. I know some people might just be watching the features. Hell yeah, that's why we make just the features, because they're really important. People who are just listening audio wise, thank you so much for sticking with my terrible audio. You have blue microphones to thank for that being rectified. And thanks as always to you, Luther, because I couldn't do this without you. So
I couldn't do it without you, man.
We'll I don't know, everyone, I guess stay tuned for another 2 weeks, and we'll be back with Roundup episode 5. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, make sure as well to check out our socials as always. My mic is just lifting itself up. Great stand here. There it is. Okay, great. It just stopped creaking. All right. Make sure to check us out on Twitter at It's2SBS for me, at Schlebo for Ash. Make sure to check out if you're watching on. It's like covering up my face now. Make sure to check out the video version of the podcast if you're listening along on podcast apps, and if you're watching along and you want something a bit more convenient, we're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, pretty much any podcast app out there. Just type in Snowball Esports, you'll find us. Check out snowballesports.com for plenty of great articles about a whole heap of games, including CS. Ash doing a lot of the content there, but also a lot of stuff around the LCO for League of Legends, a lot of stuff around Valorant as well. So if you're into other esports as well, your one-stop shop for everything, Snowball Esports. Make sure to check them out and send them some support for having us on their platform.
I can't get over your mic in your face.
Yeah, no, it's just...
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you so much, everybody. And be sure to keep an eye out for the next episode of Roundup.
Yep.